it seems to me that there's a necessity to engage, to understand, to relate to people, to have conversations with people. And yet actually somewhere missing in all of this are people. There's just no people here. It's just sets of data and figures. And I think that's where we come in, is trying to actually get a little bit closer to the experience of what people are doing, asking some questions, spending time with people. So, you know, we set out really just to go out there and ask some of those questions. I put this up just to say we're as much about generating more questions. I think there's a lot of research companies that come up and say we've got the final results and we can resolve all your problems. I don't think I would ever be as foolish or as arrogant to assume that. I think good research is more about leading to further questions and helping you to think. So I put this up. This is a work in progress, okay? We'd love to be talking to as many of you as we've already been undertaking some of the interviews, because I think it's something which is evolving and ongoing, and I think what interests us is to get everyone's opinion about your own behaviours. So certainly, you know, this is more of a think piece today. Hopefully this will help to generate a bit of thinking rather than thinking that we've got the answers. So what do we do? Well, as I said, you know, we were in the UK, and I think a lot of our work these days is more kind of deliberative in terms of going out, meeting people, giving them more of a stake in the research, getting them to take more control of the research process themselves and get more involved. So a lot of spending time with people in different places, doing stuff actually via Twitter itself, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Speaking with academics, there's a specific academic in the US, and she does a lot of work around the idea of privacy in social networks. Some of her work's really interesting. I was interested earlier in the year. I was in Lima and talking to teenagers there in Lima about this transfer from high five to Facebook, and again this sort of evolution of different social networks and what it is that's driving people in different directions. A lot of time just, you know, entering into people's spaces, and Joshua said about more ethnography and anthropology, and I think a lot of that is what we like to do. I think one thing I just wanted to point out that I found really interesting was moving beyond just talking to young people. I think a lot of brands, a lot of research that is done kind of focuses on youth as being the masters of the technology and the people who are getting the most out of the technology. Actually, one of the things that I think we found doing this work was that it's not always young people who are doing the most interesting things. It's not always young people that have those dilemmas. Actually, some of the more interesting things, as I said, happen in the workplace, happen when we change from one life stage to another. We're then confronted about identity issues and who we are, and you know, how we want to show the world who we are. And again, one of the other nice things that I think worked really well was talking to parents with their children as well, because a lot of the issues about different factors about privacy, about authenticity, and about the way that people are using social networks, they're very different on the basis of age, and actually having that generational conflict worked really well in a lot of examples. So to get us underway, there's just three basic themes that I'd like to sort of show to you today. We, as part of the ongoing kind of research that we've been doing, Alberto and myself, as you'll see, I think in a little while, Alberto is a little bit more of a Twitter person than myself, but I thought, right, okay, I'm going to force myself to do it. I will send out some messages. I will see if I get any response, and we'll look at that a bit later. But this was the first theme that I think we were really interested in looking at, is just get some examples about what people are doing, what are some of the different social networks, and how do different people relate to different social networks, and also how much of what people show of themselves in their digital lives reflects back on who they are outside of that digital life.
O Orkut eu comecei usando naquela época que ele ainda era alguma coisa conceituada, assim, era legal para achar as pessoas com quem eu tive um relacionamento lá atrás. Achei muita gente que fez colegial, estudou comigo no primário, isso é muito bacana.
Eu nunca ouvi ninguém, Vicky, cria um Facebook, me adiciona, tipo, nunca me falam isso. Pelo menos na minha idade, assim, não tem ninguém que usa o Facebook, tipo, todo mundo usa Orkut.
Eu acredito que, assim, geralmente as pessoas de classe média que utilizam mais o Facebook. Orkut é mais pro povão mesmo.
Mas já o Facebook aparentemente tem um caráter um pouco mais sério. As pessoas que estão lá sempre são as pessoas, pelo menos até agora eu não vi nenhuma pessoa que não seja a própria. E normalmente as pessoas que estão me contatando são pessoas que eu conheço também.
No Orkut eu acho que é por causa das comunidades e tal, tem mais como se relacionar com pessoas diferentes, tipo, que moram longe, sei lá, e que tem o mesmo interesse que você. Dá pra trocar informações sobre isso e tal. Já o Facebook, pra mim, é mais pra se comunicar com os amigos que você já tem, e coisa do tipo, sabe?
I go on girls' sites who aren't really my friends just to see what they're doing, just because, you know, that's what girls do. They like to check up on what everyone else is doing.
O meu nicho maior no Facebook são os jogos que estão dentro do Facebook, que eu acho que conseguem também juntar amigos, então, claro, conversas acontecem por causa dos jogos do Facebook.
O YouTube é uma outra coisa que é interessantíssimo, porque as pessoas que postam já têm um gosto comum musical. Então eu me inscrevo nas páginas deles e a gente acaba virando amigo.
Quando eu estava morando fora, eu gostava mais de deixar updated, como que minhas fotos mais recentes, dizendo mais o que eu estava fazendo, para que as pessoas daqui vissem e estivessem acompanhando a minha vida.
Nos últimos meses o Facebook para mim está sendo um lugar mais importante. Mas assim, de repente eu comecei a ter história com alguém que está no Orkut, né? E aí agora botando todas as fotos do Orkut, começando a postar vídeos que eu acho legal lá no Orkut, de novo, porque eu sei que alguém vai ver, né?
Eu tenho uma atividade cineclubista que me leva para o Orkut para adicionar diversas comunidades de cineclubes e pessoas que fazem a prática cineclubista acontecer. Já no Twitter eu tenho um outro grupo de interesse que é por determinação geográfica, então eu vou adicionando as pessoas da minha cidade e adicionando as pessoas que realizam trabalhos parecidos com o meu.
Obviously, you know, in the half an hour, 40 minutes that we've got this morning, it's kind of difficult to go into all the different sort of relationships that different types of people have to the different social networks. But I think as you can start to see there, just the different directions from which people come into their different uses of different social media, I think is really interesting. And also just how, you know, we can have very different relationships. We can read different social networks in different ways. We can assume that they are different things for us from what they are for other people. You know, sorry about I don't know if it was possible to hear fully. Bezaliel, the guy who was, you know, lives in the periferia, who talked about, you know, Facebook is more for the middle class, but, you know, Orkut is for povão. Yeah, it sounds like a Corinthians fan at that point, obviously. But I think, you know, what I find really interesting is just the fact that, you know, we don't suddenly lose all of those elements about who we are as people once we step into these online identities. You know, social class is still important. Gender is still important. I think age is still important. These factors about who we are still exist. They haven't suddenly been erased. And, you know, I think there's a lot of democratization that happens in digital media. But at the same time, I think we come into it from some very specific standpoints about who we are outside of our digital media lives.